Hey guys, it's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 LA Gladiators preview. So, I'm a little bit better than I was. I think my voice is a little bit stronger than it was, so hopefully we should have a bit of a better time today. But we're going to take a look at the Los Angeles Gladiators today, and they have actually made quite a few changes during this offseason. Not quite as extensive as our last team, London, have, but this is a very different looking Gladiators team going into 2020 than what we've seen before. So, let us look back at the history of the LA Gladiators. They are one of our inaugural teams. They finished 4th in the inaugural season, one of the most consistent teams in the league actually in terms of where they finished, because in 2019 they maintained a pretty strong finish again with a 5th place finish, and they managed to get to those automatic playoff places for the playoffs. But they did, again, one of those teams do fall to the San Francisco Shock, and yeah, quite a few teams fell to the San Francisco Shock, nothing to be ashamed of there, but a 17-11 record, 5th place in the league, that's actually really good, and the Gladiators have shown real good consistency over the past 2 years, and I think they just need to find that little knack to push on further. The question is, have the changes they've made in this off-season allowed them to find that little bit extra? So, let's go through the players they have actually let go of, and this actually amounts to 7 players they've let go of. Now, whether they've had a choice in this or not, it kind of depends. But the first player is Raw, the main tank. He's gone to the Washington Justice. Hydration, we talked about in the Houston Outlaws preview. He's obviously at Houston now. That's a massive loss for the LA Gladiators. He was a really good player. Ripper has left the Gladiators and he's now at the Academy team of London Spitfire, British Hurricane in European contenders. Decay, the DPS player, hitscan DPS I believe, is now playing for the Dallas Fuel. We said about that in the preview of the Dallas Fuel as well. Again, that's a pretty strong loss. But I think the biggest loss here for the Gladiators is Shawful. He is now at the Toronto Defiant. Now, whether that is because he wanted to play for his home team in Canada, I don't know. But he's got no chance, no offense to Shawful, but he's got no chance of getting into that Vancouver team because the Vancouver is all Korean. So Toronto was the next stop for him if he wanted to play for a Canadian team. Then we have Void, the off-tank. He is now playing at the Shanghai Dragons. And then the two-way player they had, Panker, the tank player, he is now at Phase 2 in NA Contenders. So a lot has been shifted out of the LA Gladiators. The question is, what have they replaced it with? Well, they have kept their backline from Finland. This is the Shag and Big Goose backline, the supports. Again, this is the only 2 players retained by the LA Gladiators. So there's big moves going on here. Shaz and Big Goose have always been really good supports, and I'm not surprised that they've wanted to keep hold of them going into 2020. But the question is, who are they going to have in front of them? Who is going to be the DPS? Who's going to be the tanks? Who's going to be the backup supports for the LA Gladiators this season? It's a 10-man roster currently, and there could be additions after this, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. So the first person we're going to talk about is Space, the off-tank player. Obviously, we will know Space from the Los Angeles Valiant. Well, he's made the hop across LA to the Gladiators, where he will be playing his trade for 2020. I think this is actually a really good signing. So, Space had a bit of time out of the Valiant roster because he didn't fit in, especially I think when Goats was dominant. But he made his way back in towards the end of the Valiant season last season. Valiant improved towards the end. They were very bad in the beginning. Space has always been a really, really good off-tank player. He's never been the best in the league, but he's got there's a lot at the top in terms of off-tank players. When you talk about the best in the league, you're talking about Fury and Choi Hyobin and people like that. But Space has always been a really good off-tank player. So I think this is a really good pickup for the Gladiators. And I think he will probably be their starting off-tank. And he will probably be playing alongside OG. So OG we will know from the Dallas Fuel. We talked about that Dallas Fuel a couple of days ago or a few days ago. He has left the Dallas Fuel and joined up with the LA Gladiators. Now, I have always kind of rated OG, actually. I think he's a pretty good main tank. He was never able to shine at the Dallas Fuel. Not many people have shone at the Dallas Fuel because Dallas Fuel have always been pretty poor. But OG has now moved to a team that has the ability to pop off. Will OG be the stable main tank the Gladiators need? I think he has good potential to be that stable main tank. So I'm very interested to see what OG will do this season in arguably what is a better team in LA Gladiators than what he was at. It would be very interesting to see what he does. Then we move on to some DPS players, and this is likely going to be the main DPS players for the LA Gladiators this season. The first of these is Birdring, obviously ex-London Spitfire. Now, we talked about London Spitfire yesterday. They let go basically all of their roster, and Birdring was the star hit scan DPS player for the London Spitfire in the inaugural season, where he won the league with London Spitfire. He did not have the best of seasons in 2019. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. I don't think the meta was in London's favour. I don't think it was in Birdring's favour. And we saw Birdring dropped a lot of the time for people like Guard when Sombra was strong and people like that. But Birdring is now an LA Gladiators player, and it will be interesting to see how Birdring gets on, because this is arguably a make or break season for Birdring. I didn't think he was going to get picked up back into the Overwatch League when I heard he was let go by the London Spitfire. I fully imagined, Profit and that would be in the Overwatch League, but Birdring I had my doubts about because of his poor season last season, but LA Gladiators have shown faith in Birdring and brought him into their squad. He is going to be the hit scan player for the Gladiators. It'll be interesting to see if he can get back to the form he showed in 2018. If he can, then this is an incredible pickup for the Gladiators and he will be a phenomenal DPS player. But there is this question mark over Birdring on whether he can be that player like he was in the inaugural season. So that's a question we will need answered in 2020. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that one. Then we have Mira. Mira is from Vietnam. Mira is coming from the Uprising Academy. Mira is a really good DPS player. He plays a lot of the projectile, but he does have a really good Widowmaker in his back pocket as well. So Mira is actually a really good all-round DPS player for the LA Gladiators and a really good pickup. He's only 18 as well, so he is really good. And even though the Boston Uprising, or the Uprising Academy, didn't have a massively brilliant time in NA contenders, they still are a decent team, and Mira was one of the standout DPS players for that team. But moving on, and we have a support player, and this is Paintbrush. Paintbrush comes in from Revival. Revival was the Phoenix team that was created after the Mayhem Academy was disbanded. So Paintbrush, yeah, he's not a big name player. They've always done decently at Mayhem Academy, talking about. They've done decently in NA contenders. They've never been outstanding. They did get quite a high standing in Season 1 of North America East in 2019, but apart from that, we haven't really seen too much. Paintbrush is almost certainly going to be the backup to Shax and Big Goose, and I think this is a really good squad depth pickup for the LA Gladiators. Next, we move on to another signing though, and this is the off-tank Bishu has re-signed for the Los Angeles Gladiators. We talked about this with the Guangzhou Chargers preview, but he has left the Guangzhou Charge and joined up with the Gladiators once more. Bishu is always a fantastic influence. If he isn't playing in the back room, he's always the person who is spurring the team on. He's always a great influence in the team to have. When morale's low, Bishu's always great to have around because he'll be able to rile everyone up, and it's really, really good. Bishu is also very good at being that link player because he's Korean, but he knows English very well, he knows Korean very well. He's very good at being that link player between Koreans that may not know English all that well and Americans and the rest of the roster. So Bishu is that kind of player. Do I expect him to be starting in that off-tank role? I don't think he's going to start over Space, but I think he's a very good alternative to Space if he was needed. And talking about alternatives in the tank role, we have an alternative main tank that may be coming in for OG when needed, and this is LH Cloudy. Now, LH Cloudy comes in from the Paris Eternal. LH Cloudy I have always rated. He was with Team Giganti back before he was at Mayhem Academy, and then he was at Mayhem Academy, and then he was at Paris Eternal. In Paris Eternal, he was never allowed to shine all that much. He's from Finland. He knows pretty much all of the main tanks. He can play them to a really good standard. And yes, Team Finland didn't do all that well in the World Cup last year, but I really think LH Cloudy has potential, and he's definitely deserving of this place, but I don't think he's the main tank of choice for the LA Gladiators. I think that will definitely be the BOGE, but LH Cloudy, I think, is a great alternative to OG if they needed it. And as we've been saying for this season with the homestand format, there's going to be a lot of demand on players, and so to have that ability to interchange certain players is going to be crucial throughout this season. Last up then we have Jaru, a DPS player from the United States. He's coming in from Team Envy. Now Team Envy did very well in NA West Contenders last year, winning both Season 1 and Season 2, which was a really good showing from Team Envy. And Jaru was the pinnacle of their DPS line. He knows a lot of projectile heroes like Doomfist, Safari and a Genji, but he also has to pick like a Sombra and a Tracer in his back pocket. And I always think it's handy for a team to have someone that can play the Sombra to a really good standard on their team, because Sombra can be a really good utility pick from time to time in the Overwatch League. We've seen it before, and I think we will see it again at some point. So it's always really good to have that Sombra specialist or that Sombra pick in your back pocket, and Jaru can be that for the LA Gladiators going into this season. I think this is a really good pickup for the LA Gladiators, and Jaru I don't think will start over Mirror and Birdwing in the early stages. I might be wrong, but Jaru's playtime could heavily depend on what we see from Birdwing. Because obviously if Birdwing is playing more like he was in 2019 rather than he was in the inaugural season, then perhaps the LA Gladiators may want to drop Birdwing and bring in Jaru for a bit more consistency in DPS line, which could be a really good option for the LA Gladiators going into 2020. So that rounds us off for new players at the Gladiators, and as I said, there are a lot of changes at the Gladiators. And when you look at their coaching staff as well, they've made changes there. So their translator, Shi Balnu, has gone as well, gone alongside Rien FC MNT. The performance coach has gone. John Galt, the assistant coach, has gone. Tim, the assistant coach, has gone. The assistant manager, Zaito's gone. The manager, Kez, has gone as well. Bullin, the director of social media and community, is gone. And they have replaced them with a new director of operations, B. Shi. Then they have brought in also a new assistant coach, Face. They've brought in a strategic coach, Curry Shot. And they've brought in a player manager, Andrew. So there have been quite a few changes in the backroom or the organisation for the LA Gladiators as well. So, yeah, the Gladiators are definitely going for a new look in this 2020 season. And it'll be interesting to see how this new look Gladiators does. I think a lot of it rests on the ability of these players to live up to what they were, or whether these players can show more than they've shown before. When I'm talking about like OG, I want to see him pop off because he hasn't been able to show his full potential, I believe, at the Dallas Fuel. Birdwing has a lot to prove because of his poor 2019 season, and then you've got these players which are unproven at the Overwatch League level, like Paintbrush, Mirror, Jaru, who could honestly be really good players. Really good players, but we just haven't seen them at the Overwatch League level, and sometimes that can make all the difference when players make that leap up to the Overwatch League. It's a pretty big jump from the likes of contenders. But the LA Gladiators will start off their season in week 1 in Dallas, where they will take on Vancouver Titans. That's not an easy start, but the Vancouver Titans, there's a bit of unknown about that team right now, so the Gladiators could easily pull off a win over the Vancouver Titans in Dallas if they wanted to. They only play one game that week though. After that, they will be taking a long trip to China, where they will spend a couple of weeks, because they will go to the Guangzhou homestand in week 3, where they will play the Shanghai Dragons in Guangzhou, and then they will go to the Hangzhou Spark homestand in week 4, where they will play the Hangzhou Spark. So, yeah, it's a difficult start to the season for the LA Gladiators, and it's not necessarily because they're playing extremely difficult teams or teams that they can't beat. They can beat these teams, but the thing is, you play one game in Dallas and then you've got to make that trip to China, which is kind of harsh. It would have been easier on the Gladiators if they could have started in China and then come back, but hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles in the league this year. It's always going to be like that for a lot of teams, so yeah. It'll be interesting to see what impact the travel has on the Gladiators. It'll be a very early test of this new homestand format. And unfortunately, the Gladiators have become one of the guinea pigs early on in the season. Oh well. But that is going to be it for the LA Gladiators. And the next one, we make a hop over LA to the Valiant. And the Valiant is a very different story compared to the Purple Gladiators. Valiant obviously had their colour change, they've had a lot of roster changes, but I'm not convinced about the Valiant this year. It'll be interesting, that preview, because yeah, there's a lot to talk about with the Valiant. It could be a bit of a lengthy one, but for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then!